"Excuse me, ma'am, our clearance section is downstairs." She hadn't even stepped fully through the door. The boutique's air was perfumed with exclusivity, bergamot, leather, and a quiet smugness that clung to every polished surface. Floor-length mirrors shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers. Purses perched on glass pedestals like museum pieces. The only thing not welcome in the room, it seemed, was her. Celeste Morgan paused mid-step. One hand rested lightly on her daughter's shoulder, the other held her phone with the shopping list. White dress, simple. Hair in a low bun. No makeup. No jewelry. No visible brand logos. Just her. The saleswoman, blonde, taut-faced, and too young to know better, was already squinting, as if Celeste's presence had forced her to reevaluate her entire sense of order. "I'm looking for a birthday gift," Celeste said calmly. Her voice was even, unbothered. But her eyes? Unmistakably aware. She knew this game. The woman's reply came laced with saccharine courtesy. "I see. It's just that, some of our pieces are, well, they're quite exclusive. You might prefer something a bit more accessible." Behind her, 8-year-old Amaya clutched a small stuffed giraffe. Her dark curls bounced as she looked around wide-eyed, tugging gently on her mom's dress. "Mommy, is that real gold on the purse?" Celeste smiled softly. "Maybe. Let's take a look." But they weren't given a chance. The woman's hand hovered near Celeste's elbow, not touching, but commanding. "I think you'd feel more comfortable in our outlet branch. It's just a few blocks away, and they have great deals. Very popular." Celeste looked around. No one else had been redirected. A man in shorts and flip-flops was sipping complimentary champagne while eyeing a $20,000 watch. A middle-aged woman in yoga pants was chatting with a stylist, surrounded by bags. It wasn't about what she was wearing. It never was. Celeste inhaled slowly. "I'm quite certain we're in the right place." There it was. The change. The flicker behind the eyes of the saleswoman. Irritation disguised as professionalism. "As you wish," she replied, already turning away. "Let me know if you need help." But she didn't mean it. Not really. Celeste and Amaya began walking slowly through the store. The walls were lined with limited edition handbags, couture dresses draped on mannequins, and glass cases of rare accessories. Celeste admired a hand-stitched clutch, black velvet with embroidered gold. Her fingers brushed the tag. $14,750. A laugh echoed behind her. "Don't worry, honey," came a voice, not the saleswoman this time, but another customer. "They're not real. People come in here to play rich all the time." Celeste turned. The woman was white, perhaps in her early 40s, dripping in diamonds that screamed new money. Her tone wasn't hostile, just dismissive, the kind that slices skin with sugar. Celeste held her gaze. "Is that how you shop? To play rich?" The woman blinked, lips parting. A beat passed. Then she smiled stiffly and turned back to her conversation with the sales clerk. Amaya clung closer now. Her eyes darted around, suddenly unsure. "Mommy, can we go? They don't like us." Celeste knelt beside her, leveling their eyes. "They don't know us, baby. And that's different." Before she could say more, another staff member approached, older, sharper, wearing a name tag that read Cameron, store director. His smile was polished. Practiced. But his body language betrayed a rehearsed tension. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he began, "but we do have a store policy. For the protection of our merchandise, we request that all large bags and coats be left at the front. You understand?" Celeste blinked. She looked down at her small woven tote. No coat. No large bag. Are you asking everyone to do that today? Cameron shifted. I assure you, ma'am, it's standard for certain clientele. Certain, she repeated. Interesting choice of words. There was no mistaking it now. The entire staff had made their assessment, not based on behavior, not on actions, but on skin, on silence, on simplicity. To them, she was a risk. A pretender. A body in the wrong place. Amaya's fingers trembled in hers. I'm scared, she whispered. Celeste stood up straight. She had felt this before, in boardrooms where her voice was doubted, at charity galas where donors mistook her for help, in luxury hotels where no one believed the penthouse was hers. But never in front of her daughter. Never like this. She looked Cameron square in the eye. We won't be staying long. But I'd like to see your fall capsule collection. His composure cracked, just slightly. That's by appointment. Good, she said. You're about to learn how to make one. They were led, reluctantly, to a side room showcasing the boutique's most exclusive line, rare imports, handcrafted gowns, limited releases. The mood shifted as a younger assistant with more sense stepped in. She offered polite nods and cleared space for Celeste and Amaya. But the chill from earlier lingered. It clung to the walls. It soaked into Amaya's silence. Celeste noticed it all. Every whisper. Every side glance. Every time another client was offered champagne, but not her. She said nothing. Because she was waiting. Watching. Letting them write their ending before she rewrote it entirely. Outside, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom idled at the curb, polished to a mirror finish. Inside sat Darnell, her longtime driver, hands folded patiently over the steering wheel. His watch, a gift from Celeste on his 20th work anniversary, gleamed faintly in the sun. He glanced at his phone. 10 minutes had passed. Then his earpiece buzzed. A soft voice, Darnell. We're done here. And with that, he stepped out of the car. The wind outside caught the glass door just as it shut behind them. It slammed harder than expected, like the boutique itself had spat them out. Celeste didn't flinch. She just stood there, still and dignified, letting the sound hang in the spring air like punctuation at the end of an insult. Amaya clutched her mother's hand tightly. Her eyes, usually curious and bright, had dulled into something quieter, something watchful. She was too young to name it, but old enough to feel the ache of being made small in a room that worshipped wealth but had no idea how to recognize real power when it walked through the door in flats and simplicity. Celeste knelt to her eye level. You okay, pumpkin? Amaya hesitated, then gave a faint nod. Why did they act like that? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Celeste let the question settle. It wasn't the first time she'd been asked something like it, not by Amaya, not in this country. She smoothed the curl from her daughter's forehead, then said, because some people only recognize value when it's wrapped in labels. Amaya blinked. Like price tags? Celeste smiled faintly. Exactly. Behind them, the boutique door reopened. The manager, Cameron, strode out with a nervous half-smile stitched tightly across his face, the kind executives wear when they realize the wrong person just walked away. Ma'am, he called out, still trying to salvage the day. Celeste didn't turn around. Cameron hurried closer, steps crunching lightly on the pavement. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We'd be more than happy to set up a private consultation, free of charge, of course. Our fall collection is one of a kind. Very few clients are granted access. Celeste finally looked over her shoulder. There was no anger in her expression. No raised voice. No visible triumph. Just that quiet, steady gaze, the kind that made men like Cameron sweat because it didn't need to shout to cut deep. I already saw your collection, she said calmly. And I saw what you value more than your merchandise. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. A soft click interrupted the moment. They both turned as Darnell rounded the curb. The driver was in full uniform, black blazer, crisp collar, gloves, polished shoes. He moved with the posture of a man who knew how to blend in and yet be unmistakably seen. He didn't rush. Didn't raise his voice. He simply opened the rear passenger door of the Rolls-Royce Phantom, a deep midnight blue, its chrome detailing catching the sun like a polished mirror. A hush fell around them. Even the traffic seemed to quiet as the luxury vehicle revealed its immaculate interior, white leather, hand-stitched detailing, personalized embroidery with the initials CM on the headrests. Celeste placed a hand on Amaya's back. "Let's go, sweetheart." As they stepped toward the car, a young man passing by on a scooter skidded to a stop, pulled out his phone, and whispered, "That's Celeste Morgan." Holy sh. Cameron's face lost all color. He had heard the name before. Everyone in luxury retail had. The Morgan family office. Billionaire philanthropist. Tech investor. Silent partner in 3 of the largest real estate acquisitions in the state. The woman whose face had graced the cover of Forbes with the headline, "She doesn't speak loud, she moves the earth." He swallowed hard. "Ms. Morgan," he called out, desperate now. "Please, let us make this right. I'll personally assist you. We'll offer the entire boutique for a private session. You'll have first pick of our unreleased winter line." Celeste stopped just short of the car door. Amaya had already climbed inside. The sight of her daughter sinking into plush leather after being dismissed like a street vendor's child filled Celeste with an ache too heavy for words. But she kept her voice soft. "You had your chance," she said. "What you lost today isn't a sale. It's integrity." Cameron stepped forward instinctively, his hand reaching out, not to touch, but to plead. "We didn't know who you were." Celeste turned. That line. That classic, last-ditch defense from every gatekeeper who only unlocked the door after Googling someone's net worth. "And that," she said slowly, "is exactly the problem." From the third-floor window, inside the boutique, the young sales associate, the one who had watched everything unfold, stood frozen behind a display of sunglasses. She had seen the way the manager had treated the woman. The way she had looked past the little girl with the soft brown eyes. The way everyone in the store had assumed, based on skin, on simplicity, that Celeste didn't belong. And now she watched as the car door closed with a soft thud. No drama. No confrontation. Just the silent roar of dignity. The Rolls-Royce pulled away, merging into traffic like a royal ship sailing through a sea of unaware commoners. But the ripple it left behind in that boutique. It would linger far longer than the scent of overpriced perfume. Inside the car, Amaya stretched out her legs. "I like this car better than the store." Celeste chuckled lightly, eyes softening. "Me too." Darnell adjusted the rearview mirror slightly. "Ma'am, are we heading straight to the hotel?" "Not yet," Celeste replied. "Take us to the park." Amaya's eyes lit up. "With the swings?" Celeste nodded. As the car glided through the city, Amaya turned and asked, "Mommy, why didn't you tell them who you were?" Celeste paused, considering the question. "Because I shouldn't have to," she said gently. "Because how we treat people when we don't know who they are, that's what shows who we are." Amaya looked thoughtful, nodding slowly. Then she smiled. "You're like Batman. But with prettier shoes." Celeste laughed, deep and real, the tension of the day loosening its grip. "Maybe," she said. But I'd rather be someone who builds cities than fights in the shadows. Half an hour later, a luxury SUV pulled up quietly to the same boutique. Out stepped a woman dressed in structured Dior, sunglasses worth more than a semester of college, and heels sharp enough to slice confidence. She strode inside like she owned the place. "Is it true?" she demanded. "Was Celeste Morgan here?" Cameron looked up, face still pale. "Yes. We didn't realize." The woman didn't wait. She pulled out her phone, tapped aggressively, and raised a brow. "I just canceled our partnership. Effective immediately. My clients won't shop somewhere that humiliates black billionaires in front of their children." He stammered. "Wait, please. That's a misunderstanding. We didn't." "You didn't know who she was," the woman snapped. "That's what you told her, right?" She leaned in, low and cold. "She was my college roommate. And you humiliated her in public." Her stilettos clicked like gunshots as she left. Back in the car, Celeste sat watching Amaya push herself on a swing in the sunshine. Darnell waited discreetly by a nearby bench. The world moved on around them. Mothers chased toddlers. Joggers passed with music in their ears. And somewhere inside a little girl's chest, a seed had been planted, the seed of knowing what power looked like. It wasn't loud. It didn't need approval. It walked out when it wasn't respected, and left the world scrambling in its silence. It started with a single photo. Just one. Celeste stepped into the Rolls-Royce, the back of her white cotton dress catching the breeze like a flag of silent resistance. Amaya's small hand was in hers. Darnell was holding the car door with a steady grace. And in the background, blurred, but unmistakable, stood Cameron, the boutique manager, jaw slack, eyes wide, looking like he had just watched his entire career catch fire. The image was posted by a college student walking past. He hadn't meant to start anything. Just found the whole thing surreal. A caption accompanied the shot. "This boutique just kicked out CL.est. Morgan. Said she didn't look like their usual customers. Then she stepped into a Rolls like a queen." I'm screaming. Then came the shares. The comments. The quote tweets. Then came the storm. By nightfall, the boutique's name was trending on Twitter. Hashtag she did belong. Hashtag Rolls-Royce revenge. Hashtag billionaire in cotton. Hashtag black money is real. Screenshots flooded timelines, Celeste on the cover of Forbes, Bloomberg profiles, charity work with inner-city girls, photos of her speaking on panels at Davos. Interviews from years ago where she talked about being overlooked, underestimated, and how it no longer stung, but taught her the art of quiet observation. And now? Now the world was observing her. No announcement. No PR campaign. No outrage post from Celeste herself. Just one moment of composure, and the internet did the rest. Inside the boutique, Cameron sat in the back office, watching the numbers climb. The staff had been fielding calls all evening, not orders, but complaints. News outlets had already called 3 times. Someone had emailed a request to verify whether Celeste had truly been asked to leave. Another staff member knocked lightly. "Sir," she whispered, "head office just called. They're scheduling an internal investigation." Cameron didn't respond. He was too busy staring at a looping video someone had posted from a street camera across the road. It showed the entire sequence. Celeste is being dismissed. The Rolls-Royce is pulling up. Her walking away without ever once raising her voice. And then, the part that truly destroyed him, the little girl's face as she climbed into the car. Not angry. Not confused. Just, defeated. At the Morgan family's penthouse that evening, Celeste stood barefoot in the kitchen, her phone buzzing endlessly on the marble counter. She didn't check it. Instead, she sipped tea while Amaya, now in pajamas, nestled into her lap on the oversized couch. A cartoon played quietly in the background. "I told Daddy you were better than Wonder Woman," Amaya said sleepily. Celeste smiled softly. "Oh really? She doesn't even have a car like that." Celeste laughed, setting her tea down. "I'm glad we went to the park," Amaya continued. "Even if the boutique was mean." There it was again. That quiet heartbreak in her voice. The kind that didn't scream or rage, just curled inward, learning. Celeste kissed her forehead. "They were wrong," she said. "But we don't have to carry their wrongness with us. Promise? Promise." The next morning, her assistant texted in a panic. "You need to check what's happening online. Do you want me to draft a statement?" Celeste stared at the screen. She was many things: investor, strategist, founder, philanthropist, but she had never courted virality. Her power wasn't built on being seen. It was built on endurance. On weathering storms. On watching others exhaust themselves under the spotlight, while she moved pieces in silence. Still, she knew the world was different now. Reputation was currency. Visibility was leveraged. And dignity, when defended the right way, became a spark in the hands of the right people. So she did what she hadn't done in over a year. She opened Instagram. At Celeste.Morgan. Photo: a close-up of her daughter's hand gripping hers on the swing set, half of the stuffed giraffe toy peeking out of Amaya's backpack. Caption: "She didn't understand why they treated us that way. I didn't explain right away. Because sometimes silence says more than protest. Because sometimes, a Rolls-Royce door opening says more than shouting ever could. But mostly, because I wanted her to see that walking away with your dignity intact is the most powerful response you can give to small minds in expensive rooms." Hashtag for every little girl who watched. Hashtag power is quiet. Hashtag dignity is wealth. 20 minutes. That's all it took. The post exploded, over 500,000 likes in less than an hour. Celebrities reposted it. Business leaders applauded it. Every day, our women shared their own stories of being followed in stores, misjudged, and dismissed. One comment read, "She didn't burn the building down. She burned their entire brand with grace." Queen energy. Back at the boutique, staff members gathered for an emergency meeting. The regional manager had flown in. His face was strained, and his voice clipped. "I don't care if someone walks in wearing rags and flip-flops. You greet them. You treat them like they're about to spend $1 million. And if they don't? So what? You never let your bias cost us a client, or a scandal." Cameron stood in the back, silent. He already knew it was too late. Someone had leaked the store's internal policies. Screenshots showing staff were told to gently redirect non-target demographics were now plastered across headlines. The boutique's social media accounts were flooded with one-star reviews and demands for public apologies. Even worse. One of their biggest suppliers had issued a public statement suspending all deliveries. The brand was now radioactive. Meanwhile, Celeste was still not taking interviews. She ignored requests from the Today Show, CNN, and several finance podcasts asking her to comment. She wasn't interested in monetizing the moment. She was interested in what came next. Later that week, Celeste sat down with her team at Morgan Capital for a scheduled strategy meeting. As her COO recapped their quarterly portfolio growth, a junior associate hesitantly raised her hand. "I know this isn't on the agenda, but," she began, cheeks flushed, "I just wanted to say, thank you. For how you handled that boutique thing. My niece is 10. She saw it on TikTok and told me, "Auntie, that lady's like a superhero, but fancier." The room chuckled softly. Celeste smiled, then looked around the table. "What's our Q3 social impact budget looking like?" "Flexible," the CFO replied. "Why?" She tapped her pen once, thinking. "I want to sponsor a fashion program for girls who get told they don't belong in luxury. Let's teach them style, design, and most of all, presence." That night, in her journal, Celeste wrote a single sentence. They never expected the woman they dismissed to become the blueprint. "Ma'am, would you prefer Chanel or Elie Saab for the gala?" The assistant's voice was respectful but tense, not out of fear, but awe. Celeste didn't look up right away. She was standing on the rooftop garden of her office building, watching Amaya feed koi fish in a reflecting pool. The sun was setting behind the skyline, casting long shadows across the water and catching the gold in her daughter's curls. "Neither," Celeste said finally, her tone calm. "Have someone contact Anika Ford." The assistant blinked. "The indie designer? From Atlanta?" Celeste turned. "She's got vision. She's got grit. And she's got a 2-year wait list. I'm sure we can make her an offer she can't refuse." The assistant nodded quickly and retreated, already dialing. Celeste turned back to the pool. She didn't want the gala to be about appearances. She didn't care for flashing diamonds or flashing cameras. But when the world was watching, when power was shifting beneath the surface, you didn't just show up. You arrived with intention. That week, Celeste received a formal invitation to the Trace Luxe Fashion Gala, the most exclusive luxury event of the season, held annually in New York. Reserved for billionaires, influencers, heads of fashion houses, and royalty. But this year, the organizers added a last-minute name to the program, Celeste Morgan, keynote speaker and guest of honor. It wasn't performative. It was self-preservation. The same industry that had watched the boutique scandal unfold with anxious breath now rushed to embrace the woman they once ignored. They knew what she represented now: authenticity, grace under fire, influence that no ad budget could buy. And Celeste? She knew exactly what they were doing. She accepted. But on her terms. 1 week later, the gala night arrived. Outside the venue, a restored opera house draped in white orchids and lined with velvet ropes, the crowd buzzed. Paparazzi fought for angles. Bloggers streamed live commentary. Names were shouted like mantras: Zara Kim, Tyler Loran, Naomi from House Lucent. And then, silence. Because it wasn't just the car that arrived, it was how it arrived. A fleet of black SUVs pulled up first, clearing the way. Then, the Rolls-Royce Phantom rolled in behind them, quiet as thunder. Out stepped Darnell in a crisp tuxedo, opening the rear door with measured grace. And there she was. Celeste Morgan, wrapped in a midnight blue gown designed by Anika Ford, a silhouette that draped like liquid power, with hand-embroidered constellations trailing down her spine. Her hair was pulled into a braided crown. No diamonds. No logos. Just presence. A hush fell. Then an eruption of camera flashes. Not because she was famous. But because she was undeniable. Amaya stepped out behind her in a matching dress, holding her mother's hand. Celeste didn't pose. She didn't need to. She walked. And the world made space. Inside the venue, the boutique's executives stood in the corner nursing cocktails, their faces drawn tight. The company had tried everything to recover: PR statements, charitable donations, and internal staff reshuffling. But the damage lingered like cheap perfume. Online orders had dropped 38%. High-profile clients distanced themselves. One of their investors pulled out entirely. Now, their CEO whispered nervously, "We need to rebuild trust. Tonight is our chance." "How?" one board member hissed. "She won't even take our calls." Then someone pointed. "She's coming this way." The group turned, stiffening as Celeste approached the main hall with her daughter, flanked by a quiet entourage of community organizers, black fashion students, and independent designers, all invited personally by her. One of the boutique execs made a move, a desperate step forward. But Celeste's gaze flicked over him like glass. Not cruel. Just empty. As if he didn't exist at all. And then she walked past. Later that evening, after the dinner plates were cleared and champagne flutes filled the air, the event host took the stage. "Tonight, we welcome a woman whose grace has changed how we define luxury. Not by labels. Not by wealth. But by dignity. Please welcome, Miss Celeste Morgan." Applause thundered. Celeste stepped into the spotlight, her heels silent against the old marble. She stood before the crowd without a script, without notes, her voice low but clear. "Some of you learned my name last week," she began. "Others, just today. And that's fine. Because I didn't build my life to be known, I built it to be felt." The room stilled. "Luxury," she continued, "is not how much you spend. It's how much you respect. True exclusivity isn't in price tags, it's in character. And real power? It's quiet. It doesn't demand recognition. But when insulted, it doesn't scream. It simply withdraws, and lets the absence speak louder than its presence ever could." Gasps. Murmurs. Eyes wide. She looked directly at the boutique table in the back. "For too long, some of you have mistaken proximity to wealth for permission to judge. You've curated your clientele based on assumptions. I was never asking to be let in. I was watching who you locked out." Applause rose again, this time raw, rising from every corner. "And so," Celeste said, her voice softening, "I've decided to build something better." Silence returned. "I'm partnering with designers from underrepresented communities. We're launching a new initiative, the Reframe Project. A fashion incubator, a grant fund, and a platform, to rewrite the rules of style, starting from the ground up." The room erupted. It wasn't just a speech. It was a declaration. A shift in gravity. After her keynote, guests lined up to speak to her, not just celebrities, but interns, stylists, assistants. Many of them were black, brown, or from immigrant backgrounds. Many whispered thank you if it were a secret prayer. One whispered, "I've worked here 4 years. I've never seen anyone look at us like we mattered, until now." Celeste didn't smile. She just took the girl's hand and said, "Don't wait for them to look. Make them see." Meanwhile, outside the gala hall, news trucks were parked in rows. Hashtags surged again. Clips of her speech were uploaded and reposted across every major social platform within minutes. TikTok edits. Twitter quotes. LinkedIn think pieces. She didn't just clap back, she built a new stage. Celeste Morgan is not a moment. She's a movement. And perhaps the most poetic post of all. Asterisk, they curated her out of a boutique. So she curated an entire future without them. Asterisk. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Celeste and Amaya curled up together on the terrace under the stars. Amaya pointed upward. "That one's my favorite," she said, tracing the constellation pattern in the sky, the same one stitched into Celeste's gown. "What's it called?" she asked. Celeste looked up. "It's called Lyra. It means harp. Legend says its music was so beautiful, it could move the heavens." Amaya smiled sleepily. You're like that dress, Mommy. You moved everything. Celeste wrapped an arm around her. No, baby. We did. The first garment made under the Reframe project was not a dress. It wasn't a suit or a handbag or anything made for display. It was a school uniform. Designed by a 17-year-old girl from Newark. Sewn by a refugee mother from Syria. Funded by a microgrant, Celeste approved without hesitation. The fabric was durable, stain-resistant, breathable, and beautiful. The kind of beautiful that didn't shout but felt true. Navy blue with golden threading around the seams, subtle symbols of resilience hidden inside the lining, a sunflower, a tiny torch, a braided thread. Celeste held it in her hands and nodded. This is what fashion should be, she said softly. Something that empowers you the moment you put it on. Within 3 weeks of launch, the Reframe project had raised $6.2 million in private donations and another $2.8 million through a viral fundraising campaign launched on social media. Influencers wore it. Journalists profiled it. Schools requested a partnership. But most powerful of all, young people applied. Hundreds. Then thousands. From underfunded communities. From rural towns. From places where luxury meant a clean pair of shoes for Sunday. They didn't just want to learn fashion. They wanted to rewrite the language it used to exclude them. At the center of this movement stood Celeste, not as a celebrity, not even as a billionaire, but as a builder. A woman who never once raised her voice in retaliation, and yet made her silence impossible to ignore. Her refusal to name the boutique publicly became its kind of trial. Every op-ed, every podcast, every think piece danced around the same question. What brand was it? Which boutique dismissed her? Who was the manager? But Celeste never confirmed. Never said a name. Not even once. And somehow, that made it worse for them. Because it forced the public to look beyond one storefront. To ask how many others were doing the same. And how many Celestes had walked away without a Rolls-Royce to follow them. One rainy afternoon, inside a quiet conference room at the boutique's corporate headquarters, 5 board members sat in stunned silence as their CMO closed her laptop. That's the 3rd partnership we've lost this week, she said. Who pulled out now? A man in a navy suit asked. Jewel House. And Fika Collective. Both citing misalignment of values. The CEO rubbed his temples. They had tried everything. New marketing. Staff retraining. A glossy campaign highlighting diverse beauty. They even pledged to hire a DEI consultant, which only drew more ire for being too late. But nothing landed. Nothing worked. Because Celeste hadn't just embarrassed them. She had transcended them. That's when the idea emerged. A desperate, risky, humiliating idea. We could reach out to her directly, one board member suggested. Not to apologize again. But to partner. Heads turned. She has the cultural capital. The trust. The youth. If we give her full creative direction for a capsule collection, her label, her team, it could show that we've changed. Silence. Then a low, skeptical voice, you want to give her the keys to the house she burned down? No, the board member said. I want her to rebuild it in her image. The CEO leaned back in his chair. If we're going to survive, we may have no choice. When the proposal landed on Celeste's desk, her assistant looked like she had just opened an email from another universe. They want you to design a capsule line, she said flatly. Under their brand. Full autonomy. 10% of profits to go toward Reframe. They're offering naming rights. Creative control. And a personal apology. Signed by the CEO. Celeste didn't blink. She just read the subject line again. Subject, a door we should have opened sooner. The next day, Celeste sat at her long kitchen table, the sun spilling across the marble as Amaya colored in a workbook beside her. Why do they want you now? Amaya asked, eyes focused on her crayon. Celeste thought for a moment. Because they see what we've built. And now they want to say they helped. But they didn't. No, Celeste said. They didn't. Are you gonna help them now? Celeste traced the rim of her coffee cup slowly. I don't know yet. Amaya looked up. But, you already made something better. Celeste smiled. That was the heart of it, wasn't it? She had already won, not by revenge, but by creating an alternative. A space where others like her didn't have to beg to belong. They already belonged. Why walk back into the house that slammed the door, when you've built a whole neighborhood? Still, she agreed to a meeting. Not because she was flattered. But because she was curious. And maybe, just maybe, because a part of her wanted them to say it to her face. The room was modern, sleek, and cold. The board sat at one end of the oval table. Celeste walked in alone, no lawyers, no publicists, no entourage. Just her. That, in itself, was a message. The CEO stood first. Then the others followed, like students at a recital. Ms. Morgan, the CEO began, thank you for coming. Celeste nodded but didn't sit. I've reviewed your proposal, she said, her voice measured. I have a few questions. Of course. If I accept creative control, does that include campaign direction? Yes. Staffing? Also, yes. Pricing, distribution, messaging, model casting? All yours. Celeste looked around the table. Even if I don't include any of your existing team? A pause. Then, that is within your discretion. She stepped forward slightly. And if I refuse to put your name on it? Silence. Then the CEO exhaled. Then we'll launch it under a different banner. One you choose. A sub-brand. We'll back it, but we don't have to be visible. Celeste let the room sit in that moment. Then, softly, you want me to save you without naming you? He winced. But nodded. Yes. Celeste folded her hands. I'll think about it. And she walked out. 2 days later, Celeste hosted a reframe gathering at an old textile factory her team had purchased for renovation. They were turning it into a creative campus, design studios, mentorship lounges, fabric libraries, production spaces. The air buzzed with music and laughter. Young designers showed off sketches. Older women offered sewing tutorials. Children ran barefoot across clean concrete, chalking their dreams on the floor. Celeste stood watching it all, arms folded. Beside her, Anika Ford sipped a ginger soda. So, she said, you gonna take their offer? Celeste didn't answer immediately. Anika grinned. That's a no. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Celeste smiled faintly. I think. I'll make them prove they've changed. How? Celeste looked around the room, the life blooming from what once was abandoned. I'll let them fund the future. But they don't get to design it. We do. They expected a deal. What they got was a blueprint. Celeste didn't send back a counterproposal. She sent a manifesto. 18 pages. No legalese. No fluff. Just bullet point demands delivered with surgical clarity. She titled it plainly. Terms of Ethical Revival. And at the top of the first page, in bold. If the future is to be built using the broken bones of the past, then those bones must be named, acknowledged, and restructured, publicly. Term 1. The boutique must publicly acknowledge systemic exclusion in its history and operations, not just in its incidents, but as a pattern that impacted countless customers. Term 2. All proceeds from the first Reframe collection must go toward funding scholarships for marginalized fashion students, selected by an independent board outside of the company's influence. Term 3. Every garment in the new line must carry a message sewn into the lining, a quote from a real person previously denied service, chosen by them, not by executives. Term 4. The boutique's flagship location must be repurposed, half to remain as retail, the other half to become a design incubator for minority-led fashion startups, permanently operated by the Reframe project. Term 5. Celeste would not model, market, or promote the collaboration herself. The story should no longer center me, she wrote. The story should center on the system being replaced. The boutique's board called an emergency meeting. She's asking us to dismantle our flagship, one gasped. She's not asking, the CEO corrected. She's defining the cost of redemption. A long silence. And then, quietly, the oldest board member, a man who had been in fashion for 40 years, whispered, "Maybe this is what it looks like when the gatekeepers have to live on the other side of the gate." They agreed. Every term. Publicly. Celeste didn't hold a press conference. She didn't even write a blog post. She simply posted a photo of her daughter standing outside the boutique's old glass doors, now covered in brown renovation paper. On it, someone had spray-painted a message from the first Reframe workshop. Asterisk, "We don't want a seat at your table. We're building the whole house." Asterisk. The new collection debuted under a different name. Unwritten. No mention of the boutique's original name. No reference to the scandal. No faces of celebrities or influencers. Just clothes. Designed by students, seamstresses, formerly incarcerated mothers, and queer creators who'd been told their ideas weren't aspirational. The launch was hosted in the transformed flagship store, now called the Reframe Studio. One wall was covered entirely with handwritten stories. Customers were invited to read, touch, and even add their own. The only thing locked behind glass. The original incident report from the day Celeste was denied service. On it, in a bold marker, she had written. Asterisk, "Power isn't what you do when people are watching. It's what you refuse to become when they aren't." Asterisk. Meanwhile, Amaya walked the new floor like she'd grown up there. She had her notebook now, filled with sketches, colors, patterns, and ideas. At age 9, she was already being interviewed by teen fashion blogs. "What does fashion mean to you?" She answered. "It means I don't have to dress up for someone to think I matter." Celeste watched from across the room, one hand over her heart. She hadn't set out to raise a fashion prodigy. She had just wanted to raise a girl who never mistook wealth for worth. Later that evening, as guests filtered out and the soft hum of jazz music floated through the glass walls of the studio, Celeste stood alone by the display of the new collection's signature piece. A coat. Simple in silhouette. Bone white. No logos. No shimmer. But in the lining, stitched in gold thread. Asterisk, "You didn't see me coming. You won't forget me leaving." Asterisk. Someone stepped beside her. It was Darnell, now formally hired as Director of Guest Experience for the Reframe Studio. "You sure you want to keep that quote in there?" he asked, half grinning. Celeste nodded. "It's not about anger. It's about memory." He looked around the space, alive with movement, story, and possibility. "Funny," he said. "All this started because they couldn't imagine who you were." Celeste shook her head. "No. All this started because they couldn't imagine who we could be." In the months that followed, the fashion world changed. Not because Celeste had entered it, but because she'd refused to play by its rules. Designers who had never seen themselves on a runway were now collaborating with luxury brands, not for exposure, but for equity. Boutiques once obsessed with image now trained staff on impact. Even mainstream fashion schools began revising their curricula to include modules from the Reframe studio. The boutique, now a silent partner behind Unwritten, saw a strange phenomenon emerge. Customers no longer cared who owned the store. They cared who told the story. And now, it was finally the right people. One evening, months after the studio opened, Celeste and Amaya walked by the boutique's old review wall, once littered with complaints, now replaced with stories. A woman stood there, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was holding a small tag from a jacket she'd just bought. On the back was her quote, submitted months ago during the community drive. They made me feel like I was stealing air by being in the room. Now, it was art. Now, it was stitched into history. Celeste didn't interrupt her moment. She just placed a gentle hand on Amaya's shoulder and whispered, "This is why we never shouted back. Because this is louder." Amaya, wiser now, simply nodded. "I think I want to write one too." Celeste smiled. "What would it say?" The girl paused. Then. "You tried to ignore us. Now you have to learn from us." The invitation came in an unmarked envelope. No golden seal. No fancy handwriting. Just a plain white envelope, hand-delivered to Celeste's office by a quiet man in a dark suit who didn't say a word. Inside was a single card. The White House would like to formally invite Ms. Celeste Morgan to join a policy advisory board on creative equity and economic reform. Your presence is not requested, it's needed. At first, she thought it was a mistake. A billionaire fashion disruptor on a national economic policy board? It sounded like something a headline editor might invent. But the more she sat with it, the more it made sense. What she had created wasn't just about clothing. It was about structure. About who gets in. Who gets funded. Who gets mentored. Who gets erased. And now, they wanted her to help rebuild those systems, not just for style, but for education, business, tech, culture. Amaya heard the news at breakfast. "So, you're going to Washington?" Celeste sipped her tea. "Maybe. I'm thinking about it." "Why are they asking you?" Celeste smiled. "Because someone has to make sure the new rules aren't written by the same people who broke the old ones." Amaya considered that. "Can I come?" Celeste looked at her daughter, this bright, soft-spoken girl who had once stood in a boutique and watched her mother be humiliated without a word. And now, she asked to walk into the center of power beside her. Celeste nodded. "Of course you can." In D.C., the meeting wasn't held in the main chambers. It took place in a private roundtable room, walls lined with books instead of flags. Only a dozen people were invited. Tech founders. Community organizers. Professors. Young entrepreneurs. All of them had something in common: they had built alternatives to broken institutions. The moderator, a senior advisor to the president, opened the session. "We're not here to fix the old machine," he said. "We're here to design something that doesn't break people in the first place." Celeste watched quietly, arms crossed, until it was her turn to speak. She stood slowly. "I don't believe in diversity panels," she said flatly. A few faces shifted. "I believe in ownership. In redesign. In flipping the blueprint. I'm not here to help you color inside the lines. I'm here to redraw the borders." Silence. Then, slow, nodding approval from around the table. The kind of nods that said, "Finally. Someone said it." Later that evening, as she walked through the quiet halls of a memorial plaza with Amaya by her side, Celeste took in the names carved into stone: activists, artists, senators, soldiers. "I never thought I'd be invited into a room like that," she said softly. Amaya looked up. "But you didn't wait for the invitation, right?" Celeste smiled. "No," she said. "I just stopped asking for one." Back in New York, things were shifting faster than even her team could track. Luxury brands that had once rejected Reframe's partnership proposals now flooded her inbox with new offers. Modeling agencies asked her to recommend fresh faces. Ivy League universities requested curriculum consultation. But most interesting of all, a call from a French fashion house, one of the oldest, most rigid in the industry, inviting her to purchase a controlling stake. Celeste stared at the screen for a long time. Ownership. Not collaboration. Not sponsorship. But ownership. It was tempting. But she wasn't looking to wear someone else's name. She was building her own. At the next Reframe board meeting, Celeste laid out the plan. "We're not just a project anymore. We're a movement. We're going to open a permanent design school. Scholarships. Mentorships. Apprenticeships. Not just fashion. Architecture. Digital media. Film. If the culture is being shaped, we'll shape it." The room lit up with energy. But her tone turned firm. "And we'll fund it ourselves." She outlined the next phase of Reframe, a capital reinvestment program. 70% of all profits from Unwritten would go into a trust governed not by executives, but by creators. "Power without circulation is just branding," she said. "We circulate." Months passed. The studio expanded to 2 more cities, Chicago and Oakland. The Reframe Design School broke ground in Newark. And every week, Celeste still met with her team face to face, no Zoom. No assistants are speaking for her. She sat with every new applicant to the program. Read their essays. Touched their swatches. She still walked the floor with Amaya every Sunday, wearing jeans, plain sneakers, and a reusable bag. No one ever questioned her presence again. Not because they recognized her, but because she had built a space where questioning someone's presence was no longer part of the culture. One Sunday morning, after they left the studio, Celeste and Amaya walked by the old boutique building again. The plaque on the wall had been updated. This space once served as a symbol of exclusion. It now stands as a monument to transformation. Beneath it, etched into the concrete. "For every voice that was silenced, this place is yours now." Amaya ran her fingers over the stone. "Do you think they're sorry?" she asked. Celeste paused. "I don't know," she said. "And maybe that's not the point anymore." Amaya looked up. "Then what is?" Celeste smiled. "That we didn't wait for their apology to build something better." The sky was a deep, velvet blue the morning the Reframe School opened its doors. Not one of those overly staged ribbon cuttings with politicians in hard hats and forced smiles. There were no luxury car sponsors. No branded photo booths. No Instagram influencers clutching gift bags. Just people. Hundreds of them. Mothers holding the hands of girls with big eyes and even bigger notebooks. Former tailors who had once worked under sweatshop conditions now stand proudly as faculty. High schoolers from every borough with sketchbooks pressed to their chests like passports to a world that had finally welcomed them. And at the center of it all, Celeste. Dressed, as always, in simplicity. A white blouse. Cream slacks. Flats. No makeup. No logos. But somehow, everyone in the crowd turned when she stepped up to the podium, as if her presence tugged at something inside them, even before she spoke. She looked out over the crowd and paused. A long pause. The kind only a person with full control of the room can afford to take. I never dreamed of this school, she began softly. I dreamed of a world where it wouldn't have to exist. Murmurs passed through the audience, not discomfort, but understanding. I dreamed of walking into rooms where I didn't have to prove I belonged. Where my daughter wouldn't be taught to shrink before she even stretched her wings. Where creativity wasn't owned by the few, and access wasn't granted like a favor. She looked down for a moment, at the stage, at the polished stone beneath her feet, then up again. And yet, here we are. A silence fell over the crowd. The kind born not of quiet, but of listening. This school isn't just for designers, she continued. It's for builders. Thinkers. Poets. Codebreakers. Visionaries. It's for every kid who was told they were too loud, too weird, too poor, too brown, too black, too female, too much, and still kept imagining anyway. A few people wiped their eyes. In this building, we don't just teach fashion. We teach freedom. Freedom to imagine. Freedom to belong. Freedom to walk away from systems that never deserved us and build new ones with our names on the door. She stepped away from the podium. No flourish. No selfie. Just the truth. And that was enough. After the ceremony, Celeste stood in the central garden of the campus, surrounded by students exploring the space. The school wasn't shaped like a traditional institution. It didn't have wings and bells and cloistered halls. It had open studios. Rooftop greenhouses. A central corridor filled with light where music and movement flowed freely. She'd once said, if the space doesn't feel like a hug, it's not finished yet. Now, it did. Amaya, now 10, stood at the school's storytelling wall, a tall white canvas where students were invited to paint, write, or sketch their ideas every week. She held a marker in her hand. She'd been quiet all day. Watching. Thinking. Listening. Celeste approached gently. "Wanna write something?" Amaya nodded slowly. "But not about you." Celeste smiled. "Good." Amaya uncapped the marker. And with slow, steady lines, she wrote. Asterisk, you tried to make her small. She made space for all of us. Asterisk. Inside, a former foster youth from Baltimore took her first sewing class. A student who had fled political violence in Honduras presented a capsule collection sketch based on the colors of resilience. A young trans man showed his garment designed to hide scars in a way that felt powerful, not ashamed. In every hallway, every studio, Reframe wasn't just a name, it was a promise. To change how the world looked at value. To dismantle the myths that kept brilliance in hiding. To replace judgment with mentorship. And to let talent bloom in every shade, every shape, every story. That night, after the crowd left and the doors were locked, Celeste and Amaya returned to the garden. It was quiet now. Just the sound of wind through leaves and the soft buzz of crickets. Amaya lay on her back, staring at the stars. Celeste did the same. They didn't speak for a while. Then Amaya whispered, "Did you think all this would happen the day you walked into that boutique?" Celeste let out a soft laugh. "No, baby. I thought I'd buy a dress and go home." "Why didn't you yell at them?" "Because I've seen yelling. It makes noise. But it rarely makes a change." Amaya turned to face her. "So what makes change?" Celeste looked into her daughter's eyes, steady, clear, unblinking. "Vision," she said. "Patience. And the guts to walk away from the table and build your own." Amaya was quiet. Then she said, "You think people like them, the ones who judged you, learned anything?" Celeste tilted her head toward the stars. Some did. Some won't. That's not my job. What's your job then? Celeste smiled. To hold the door open. Even if they never meant to open it for me. Especially then. Somewhere in another city, a little girl watched a clip of Celeste's speech online. She closed her browser and pulled out her sketchpad. In a barbershop, two teenagers debated whether they could pitch their shoe brand to the Reframe incubator, and dared each other to apply. In a small town in Arkansas, a former boutique clerk who once turned away a black woman because she didn't look the part sat in her kitchen, reading about the new school. She didn't say much. Just whispered, "Damn." And donated. Celeste didn't need awards. She didn't seek validation. She didn't become a movement by being loud. She became a movement by being right. By refusing to shrink. By building what others only dared to imagine. And by teaching a generation, starting with her daughter, that you don't need to belong to take up space. You just need to believe that the space was never theirs to gatekeep in the first place. Life lesson from Celeste's story. What if dignity could rewrite history? Celeste Morgan's journey reminds us of a powerful truth. You don't have to scream to make change. Sometimes, you just have to refuse to shrink. In a world that often tries to measure your worth by your appearance, your background, or your silence, Celeste chose not to fight for acceptance. She walked away with grace, built something better, and let the world catch up. The most powerful revolutions don't always begin with anger, they begin with vision. With knowing who you are. By turning rejection into redirection. Celeste didn't just prove a boutique wrong, she opened doors for thousands who never got the chance to step inside. Let this be a reminder, you don't need permission to belong. You don't need validation to matter. And when someone tries to diminish you, you can build a platform so strong that they'll one day ask to stand on it. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that uplift, empower, and transform. Together, let's reframe the world, one story at a time.